What would you do? If you were trapped at 12,000 feet in a frozen hell, surrounded by death, with no food, no help, and no way out? What if to survive, you had to make a choice that would haunt you forever? This isn't fiction, this is real. This is the chilling, true story of survival against all odds. Welcome to Evolve Docs. Today we bring you one of the most incredible, human endurance stories in history, the tragedy and triumph of Flight 571. On October 12, 1972, a chartered aircraft took off from Montevideo, Uruguay. Aboard were 45 Souls rugby players, friends and family full of life, laughter, and excitement. Their destination, Santiago, Chile. But between them and their goal stood the Andes, the spine of South America and one of the most treacherous mountain ranges in the world. The flight was expected to last just a few hours. No one on board knew that they were flying toward an ordeal that would last for 72 excruciating days. Midway through, a storm forced the plane to land in Mendoza, Argentina. The next day, with skies clear, they took off again. For an hour, everything seemed fine. But at 3:21 p.m., the plane began its descent too early. Unknowingly, they were still in the heart of the Andes. Suddenly, turbulence struck. The sky turned white with clouds. Warning alarms screamed. Visibility was zero. When the clouds finally broke, what the pilots saw sent a jolt of horror through their spines, a mountain wall rising straight ahead. They pulled the aircraft's nose up with every ounce of power, but it was too late. The plane's tail slammed into the mountainside. The back of the fuselage was torn open, sucking passengers into the freezing abyss. Seconds later, a wing was ripped off. Bodies were ejected. Screams filled the air, then silence. The shattered front portion of the plane crash landed onto a glacier, sliding down at terrifying speed before coming to a halt at 3,570 meters. Most of the fuselage was destroyed. The cockpit was crushed. The pilots were gone. Yet somehow, 33 people were still alive. They were injured, bleeding in shock, and alone in a vast white wilderness. Rescue seemed certain at first, but within days, hope began to fade. Search teams couldn't see the white wreckage against the snow. Survivors screamed at planes overhead, waving hands and makeshift flags. But the aircraft kept flying past. Then came the night. The cold was indescribable. Temperatures plunged to -30 degrees Celsius. 5 more died that first night. Blankets were made from seat covers. They blocked the broken fuselage with luggage. But death crept closer every day on the 8th day. The worst news came through a salvaged radio. The search had been called off. Can you imagine that moment? Hearing the world had given up on you, some cried, some prayed. But Fernando Parado stayed quiet. He had a plan. By now, food was gone. The survivors tried to eat cotton stuffing and leather seat covers. It only made them sicker. Then came the darkest moment. Faced with starvation, made a horrifying choice to eat the flesh of the dead. People they had loved, teammates, family, friends. The first to try was Roberto Canessa, medical student. Others followed days later. The grief was unbearable, but survival demanded sacrifice. Then, an avalanche struck. The wreckage was buried. 8 more were suffocated beneath the snow. Now, just 19 remained. Parado, Canessa, and a third survivor, Vicentin, decided they would climb out, literally out of death's grasp, out of the Andes. They created a sleeping bag from airplane insulation and stitched it by hand. They layered every piece of clothing they could find. On December 12th, 60 days after the crash, they began their journey westward, unaware that the Andes still had more cruel surprises in store. No mountaineering experience. No maps, no gear, only will. They climbed for 3 days. When they reached the summit, they saw what they feared most. Mountains for as far as the eye could see. Still, they pushed forward. Vicentin turned back to conserve food. Parado and Canessa marched on. 9 days of hiking later, nearly dead, frostbitten and skeletal. They reached a river valley and spotted humans. 1 man on horseback, 1 shot at rescue. They couldn't shout over the roaring river. But with paper, pencil, and desperation, they scribbled a message. I come from a plane that crashed in the mountains. I am Uruguayan. We are 14 survivors. Please help. The man, a Chilean farmer named Sergio, rode for 10 hours nonstop to alert authorities. On December 22nd, helicopters finally reached the crash site. 16 survivors were pulled from the ice. They had been trapped for 72 days. What saved them wasn't just luck. It was resolve, love, courage, and above all, the will to live. This was not just a crash, it was a test of the human spirit, of how far people will go for life. When the world gave up, they didn't. They endured the unthinkable and emerged as a symbol of resilience. This is the miracle of the Andes, and this is Evolve Docs. Thank you for watching if you found this story moving. Subscribe for more powerful tales from the past that shaped who we are today.